Good evening and welcome to number 10 in our Marshall Fire Roadmap to Recovery series, and also for 2021 California Fire Survivors. Tonight's webinar through the UP Roadmap to Recovery program will focus on buying a replacement home versus rebuilding after a wildfire. I want to thank you all for finding the time to be with us tonight. And we are here to bring you information that we hope will help you with the process that you are in the middle of. You can follow along with the slide deck tonight by going to our website and then clicking on the events tab, which you'll find in the navigation bar all the way on the right, program events. And then you can see it highlighted on the slide. You click on that link and it will take you right to the slide deck so you can follow along. And because we're recording, your friends, neighbors will be able to watch it later if they want to. And if you see something that you didn't quite absorb and you want to see it again, you'll be able to go on and watch the recording, listen, and you'll be able to access the slides at your convenience. I want to thank Carolyn Winter on my team who's here for getting the slides up promptly so it would be easier for you to follow along. And by that now, you probably already have seen this slide a number of times, but a reminder that we are a nonprofit organization. Our focus is on insurance consumer advocacy and assisting in disaster recovery. This is our 31st year in operation. So we've had quite a few wildfires under our belt in terms of hearing, listening to people as they're going through the process, and then developing guidance, answers, resources, samples to address issues as they come along. So everything we do is in a constant state of being improved as time goes on and we learn more. We bring that to you. So we don't take money from insurance companies, but we do know a lot about insurance. And we're very focused on helping with problem solving. Our team up, as we call it, consists of our professional staff, myself with you tonight. I'm one of the founders of the organization and a lawyer. I'm joined by my deputy executive director, Valerie Brown, very experienced in disaster recovery as well, and Carolyn Winter, whose title I'm going to bungle. So I'll just say that Carolyn is a hub of getting your questions answered and helping us with programs like the one we're offering tonight. Then we have our partners in California and Colorado. Both departments of insurance are our partners, as well as state officials who are involved in the recovery effort and people in the business community as well. We get a lot of our work gets done by volunteers. We have 2 special volunteers here with us tonight. And then for those of you who are have signed on to one of our, or registered for one of our survivor forums, where it's sort of more of the community and kind of sharing with like-minded people in a similar situation, more of an emotional support type of a forum. You may have already met Sharon. She's been really helpful in those forums that we host. And then all of our consumer-oriented professionals that are in your communities that are making themselves available to help. And there's the chat here where you can, there you go, there's Carolyn's title, Consumer Communications Manager. And then from time to time, we may post information in the chat. You are welcome to use the Q&A if you have questions for our team on tonight's topic. Tonight's program is here through our Roadmap to Recovery program, but we also do a lot of advocacy work, and the rights that you have in California and that you that you just got a little too late technically for Marshall folks in Colorado to buy a replacement home and still collect your whatever code upgrade coverage you would have had and extended replacement. Those rights that are now in law, we helped to secure through our advocacy work. So I know we don't ask anybody to do any volunteer work until they're really have their feet on the ground. But down the road, when you have your feet on the ground again, we welcome volunteers for both what we're doing tonight and also advocating to make things easier for future survivors. Just that quick disclaimer, we always need to give. We're here to give you guidance, not legal advice. And we do encourage you to confer with an attorney if you have a legal issue. We make that as easy as we can by identifying lawyers in our Find Help directory that specialize in representing insurance consumers, policyholders such as yourselves. And we also host periodic pro bono legal help clinics. Here's your library. We keep it updated as best we can for California and for Colorado. Hopefully you visit those libraries from time to time to get help. These are upcoming events. In August, we have one of our survivor sessions. And then again, on the 17th, we will have strategies for settling, and we will have a public adjuster and a lawyer from California and a public adjuster and a lawyer from Colorado. And we're doing this in tandem because it's the most efficient way for us to bring you information. So tonight, I've introduced myself and Valerie, and I'm so pleased to be joined by two survivor volunteers, Tim Crean, who lost his home in last December at the very, very end of the year in the Marshall Fire in the Boulder area. And Tim, thank you so much for being willing to share your nuggets of wisdom this evening.
Thanks, Amy.
Okay, and Sharon Bard is also with us. And some of you, as I mentioned, may have already encountered Sharon's calm and positive demeanor as a survivor to survivor volunteer. Sharon lost her home in a 2017 wildfire that a lot of people know as either the Wine Country fires or the North Bay fires. Sharon, thank you so much for being with us.
You're welcome.
So we're going to cover the decision process for those who are either have already firmly decided to rebuild or are still sort of teetering in the process of making that decision. We will hear Tim's story and Sharon's story. We'll talk a little bit about some of the legislation that has resulted in state laws relevant to the topic. We'll hit some of the challenges and then some resources for overcoming those challenges. I wanted to have this slide right up here early in the program because, we sort of say, we talk a little bit about, the gospel according to UP, which is basically like all these pearls of wisdom that people have shared with us, people like Sharon and Tim over the years. And we try to sort of find the patterns, what works for a lot of people. And this is one of them that it's really, I think people can get discouraged when we say you get what you negotiate. Because I think, people like to think, well, aren't there rules? And, and there are, but just like everything else in life, and especially with a topic like buying a replacement home, because it's kind of it's still sort of a new right that you have. There's a lot of play in the situation. There are adjusters who didn't even know that you have that right. There are adjusters who don't know that the law has changed. There are adjusters that think, we don't want to see this person that doesn't end up with two lots, the new house and the old, and people bring their own kind of perspectives, which is why we're here to give you negotiating points, talking points, and this is one of the most important ones. Polite assertiveness is generally the best way to get what it is that you need. Now, that's not to say that you have to bend over backwards throughout the process to be nice to an adjuster who's not being nice to you. But that's just to say that trying to keep it business-like the whole time is always the best approach. And being assertive, but without being rude is also really important, because adjusters are human beings, and when they feel like they're being attacked, they're going to react like a human being. Anyway, so and I shared that, and then this is the lay of the land for all of you. As you can rebuild the house you had, you can rebuild a different house, you can buy elsewhere or rebuild elsewhere. The question is always going to be, how much money is your insurance company going to make available to you to pursue which of those choices you decide to make? And then the other issue is always going to be, how do you make that decision? And for a lot of people, it takes a lot longer than you might think. So, it's going to include things like, what can you afford? How much money is your insurer gonna make available to you? If you want to take out a loan, where's that going to come from? And then what do you want to do? What's best for your family? Downsizing, moving. Those are some of the questions. And then additional funds. Do you have savings you can throw into the pot? Can you afford to use some of your contents money towards the purchase? In California, you have the right to add your other structures coverage to the pot. In Colorado, the law now says that, but since it's not retroactive, it's a negotiation point whether you could do that. But again, that's one of those things that, as long as you're politely assertive with your adjuster, it's pretty likely you'll be able to use other structures toward into the pot towards the purchase. And then, of course, some people have pursued strategies like adding some sort of income source type of a thing to the plan, a granting unit to the rebuild. Or I heard a story yesterday from a realtor who helped a Marshall Fire person basically use their ALE money, plus they got a loan, and they use that to buy an investment property for them to live in for a couple years, but they're still rebuilding. So there's a lot of options out there when you sort of think out of the box. But a lot of the time, it really requires having the right professionals to help you. I think this guy was pretty good at negotiating. Okay. So these are some of the considerations people have about whether they want to stay in their community, and then where they are in their lives. Tim, I have a slide for you, but I kind of just want to get you in right now, because we were talking about this earlier. You had mentioned that your children's ages were a factor in your decision to buy instead of rebuild. So can you speak to that now, and then we can get into the more details later?
Yeah, sure. I think I had mentioned that we were on the rebuild path. As of late January, we had a builder lined up. We had a pro bono architect that a friend had found for us. So we were moving down that path probably all the way through April. For us, when our mindset started to switch a little bit towards the option of purchasing, our kids' age definitely did factor into that. I think if they had been young and really the neighborhood was a core part of their life and all their friends were in the neighborhood, I think there would have been no way that we would have purchased somewhere else. The neighborhood, they wouldn't have wanted to leave. But with a kid about to go off to college next year and another one a couple of years later. I think they were in a slightly different place where they just wanted to be connected to their town and their high school. And it wasn't quite as important for them to be necessarily in the neighborhood. And we actually got lucky to end up literally like a 5-minute walk from our old neighborhood. So, you know, they still do have that connection in a lot of ways.
And then Sharon, you mentioned that there was a bit of a factor, not so much about your kids, but that for you, there were, you could see while you were making your decision that the complexion was changing anyway, that there were fewer kids in the area. Was that part of your decision?
I think part of my decision was that I kept getting pressure from the neighbors and from the insurance company to rebuild, and something inside just didn't quite feel right, given that I was living alone on some area with acreage, and it was becoming harder to maintain it. So it took me about 1.5 years before I finally made the decision, and I was waffling back and forth because it was hard to make this kind of a change in a kind of a traumatic situation internally, and with so many people. It was such a large fire that getting information and all the, I mean, it was just a very, very complex situation either way.
Yeah.
So I basically just stalled. And in hindsight, I think that wasn't a bad thing, because I was able to look at all the issues that were coming up.
Yeah, yeah. You know, the whole question of, you know, how quickly do you have to make these decisions? I think a lot of pressure, you know, comes at people after a wildfire from all different sources. And, you know, a lot of the, to make decisions, you know, I talked to somebody yesterday whose home was just lost in the Oak Fire in Mariposa near Yosemite. And, you know, we talked about how, you know, he said, you know, I was getting pressured by a public adjuster that I better hire him right away. And I said, well, here's really the hiring a public adjuster is fine. If, you know, there's nothing wrong with that, but there's no rush to do that. And I think that, you know, one of the issues, I think, you know, a public adjuster may genuinely think, well, if you don't hire me right away, the insurance company is going to dangle a check in front of you. It's going to look like a lot of money and you're going to take it, and I could probably get you more. So they have their reasons for pushing you. Your neighbors might have had their own reasons. Other people might have, you know, their reasons, that other, you know, an adjuster might pressure you because they want to, you know, they just want to move on or what have you, or they don't want to do something unusual, right? They just want to, you know, buying a replacement home is still a little bit unusual. It's getting less so, but it's still definitely not what what most people do, which is why we're holding the program tonight. Okay, so we're going to get back in a little bit more detail with both of you. But, you know, these are some of the common questions that people grapple with when they're making this decision. Do they have, you know, 2/3? Probably in Marshall, it's going to be more. We're just closing our a survey right now, a 6-month survey in the Marshall area, and we'll know whether it's more than 2/3 that are underinsured. But it feels like a lot of people are underinsured in the aftermath of the Marshall fire, and of course that's a factor. But it's you know, it can cut both ways in terms of, like, does it make more sense to buy versus rebuild? In a way, you know, it really, since all these options are on the table, it's just another consideration, right? So, you know, tax implications are always something to keep in mind. You know, what's going to happen with your property tax basis if you buy. California has rules on that, but we're not here to talk about taxes. So I just would recommend that you either watch one of the recordings of a previous income tax focused webinar. We've done quite a few of them, or visit our website. So I encourage everyone to take a breath, relax your shoulders so that the blood can flow to your brain. You can absorb all this information. Okay. Here we are, survivors who bought. So Tim, you I kind of made you start in the middle of your story. How long did it take you to decide you were gonna just buy and not rebuild? Can you talk to us a little bit about that process?
Sure. Yeah. It's interesting. I think Sharon mentioned something about obstacles or barriers that come up that make you kind of pause and rethink. And that, that was very true for us. So we were on the rebuild path all the way into probably the end of April. We were in an apartment. We had one large dog, one small dog. It wasn't working for us. So we started looking for rental properties. We were pretty committed that we wanted to stay in Louisville. We didn't want to be disconnected from friends in the community. We were having a really hard time finding a rental at that point that would take 2 dogs. At the same time, our architect was kind of not really meeting commitments that he was making to us. And so we were feeling really bogged down from that perspective when we were looking, when are we going to get to permitting, all that kind of stuff. It was very stressful. And we started to look for properties to rent. And as we were doing that, a realtor friend of ours was helping us with that. And all these properties started coming on the market, it being spring and all. And so we kind of switched gears from looking for rentals to going, well, maybe we could buy. And we started doing the mental gymnastics and answering all those questions. We put an offer on a house. We got outbid by $50,000 or something like that. And so we just kept looking, and finally we found this place, and our realtor worked us through the process, and we got incredibly lucky to, find a place in Louisville, not too far from our old neighborhood. I think the kids, when they saw it, they just kind of were like, oh, okay, well, this kind of looks like our old house in some ways. Inside, it was very close to it, and they just kind of said to us, we're fine with this. If this is what you want to do, Mom and Dad, this is okay with us. It kind of, we've got our friends, we've got our community, we're near our high school. That's what was important to them as teenagers. So that's kind of how we got there.
Yeah. And was the realtor somebody that you knew? I think you said it was a friend.
Yeah, local realtor, good family friend. Yep.
Okay. And so can you talk to us a little bit about the insurance? How was the insurance company's involvement in the purchase? Did they have any involvement at all?
Yeah, so we were pretty underinsured. If we had rebuilt, my guess is somewhere in the $200,000 to $300,000 underinsured range. And so State Farm had really kind of given us most of the payout that our policy limits would have made us eligible for. There were some things left on the table, like ordinance and law and things like that, that we're never going to get unless we rebuilt. So once we were under contract on a place, or put a contract down, I just talked to the adjuster and let him know what we were thinking. He was actually really great. I mean, I thought all through this process that we were going to hit, blocks, or something was going to derail the whole thing. And I was actually surprised that the insurance company was not a real barrier. I mean, they just told us the couple of pieces of information they needed, which was the real estate contract, and then the county assessed value of the land for the new place.
So, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more later about the land value issue. So we'll just put a pin in it. We'll definitely come back. Okay, great. I'm sure we're going to have some more questions for you. Sharon. Um, uh, Here's Sharon in the height of COVID. Manning, I don't know if Manning, peopling our table at an assistance center for, I don't know if this was maybe the Kincaid or Glass Fire, maybe Glass Fire. And this is
Kincaid.
Kincaid, okay. And this is, you know, the beauty of people who pay it forward. Sharon, we were there for her. She was there for the next generation, and has been a really great volunteer. So Sharon, tell us your story of how you bought and how you came to make that decision, how long it took you, and then, you know, some of the logistics.
Yeah, it just was a really hard decision because all I knew was my neighborhood and where I had lived, and yet it didn't feel quite right to go through those arduous hoops to rebuild. So because it was just overwhelming. So I ended up moving to a community about 20 minutes north of where my home had been, into a small town, which was a big change for me because I'd been out in the country. And I first moved into a little like 600 square feet, an old carriage house that a friend had. And so it was furnished, and I was just taking care of immediate needs, getting the car, getting the computer, all of those kinds of things. And the idea of what to do with the property and the rebuild, I couldn't even go there in my mind. I just couldn't go there. And so I was weighing these things like, taking care of myself emotionally, what's realistic in terms of my age, and rebuilding at a time when it would make sense to be downsizing rather than expanding, which most people were doing in my neighborhood. And then, of course, there was the money issue. And I was one of the people who were underinsured because the construction prices were so astronomical. It was a heyday for people people needing construction. And I didn't have anyone that I knew of in my circle who was building getting a replacement home. Everybody was either rebuilding, or those who I knew who weren't left the area. They totally left the area either to be with their kids, or they just couldn't deal with the kind of being in a catastrophe area. So I lived in this tiny little place for about a year, and then something came up where I realized that I had more in the pocket of ALE, that I could buy a home, that I could rent a home and practice. So that's what I did. And in the same neighborhood that I had that I had been living in, the tiny place. And then I started like getting things like, oh, I probably need kitchen stuff. I was moving that slowly, even though there was a bed and a couch and all that. And more it was feeling like this little community where I could walk it to the town square. And I had some people that I knew here, and I'm going, this is feeling more and more like the better decision. Mm-hmm. So little by little, I was letting go of kind of the overwhelming idea of rebuilding, although the insurance company was continuing to tell me you will lose money if you don't rebuild, which turned out that wasn't the case. Right. And the neighbors saying, why are you going to leave? I mean, this is so beautiful. And it was, the area had been really beautiful, but of course it had changed with all of the, the trees gone. So it just took me time to finally decide, you know what, I think I'm going to move here, and I'm going to downsize, and it probably makes sense. And it's like I just needed to come to make peace with the situation. I wasn't going to get my old home back, If I went back to the old neighborhood, it wasn't going to be the same. If I moved to a community which has a whole different ambiance, there's pro and con to that. So my quest began to look at what money I was getting back, what was I comfortable to pay for a house, and accept that it was a kind of a trade-off. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is the, this is one of those questions that maybe doesn't have a crystal clear right answer, but and I think for a lot of people, only time will tell, right? For example, I will show you in the next slide. So we were going to have another presenter, but she had a fall today and couldn't be with us. But I thought it was worth sharing this email that she sent me. And this kind of goes to that question that the Oak Fire gentleman and I were discussing of like, how quickly do you have to make these decisions? Because usually it's almost always, it's not as quickly as some people would say, right? That you almost always have more time to make decisions after going through a wildfire than people will lead you to think. There's all this pressure, but what we try to tell people is, yes, there are deadlines in the insurance policy, but they're way down the road. So just take your time to really think about these things, because a lot of the time that people do things quickly, they sort of in hindsight say, I probably should have taken a little more time. And not always. But yeah, so that's, that's something. This was with the perspective of somebody who's not here, so we can't ask her any more questions, but I thought it was something worth sharing anyway. And we're going to get back to both of you, Sharon and Tim, and we already got a question for Tim, but we're going to go back to the slides a little bit and then and come back to the two of you. So, okay, what is the starting point? And it's almost identical whether you're going to rebuild or buy. In order to know how much money you're going to get out of your insurance policy, you need to take your best shot at getting an understanding that you feel confident is reasonably accurate of what it would cost if you replicated that house that you had that was destroyed, stick for stick, board for board. What would you have to pay for materials and labor and construction supervision and code upgrades and insurance, all the other things that go into a construction project? And that, getting to that is really what we recommend the most strongly, is that you focus on that. Because okay, if you were paid your policy limits, including everything that was in that policy, extended replacement and, every code upgrades, whatever was in that policy, or if you didn't have those things and your insurer just did the math and you've double checked their math and they cut you checks for everything that they owe and they don't hold back depreciation, then you don't have to go through that process of figuring it out. You've gotten everything that was available in the policy. And, if you're underinsured, that's a whole nother, question of whether you can pursue a remedy. But if they're maxing you out, then okay, this is how much I've got. And a lot of people who buy, they are like Tim, they were underinsured, so their insurer cut them the full check, which insurers sometimes do. When you're very underinsured, they'll just cash you out, and then you have the flexibility to do what you want with that money. Not everybody has that option. There's often your insurer is going to hold you to those formulas. We only pay this much until you show us that you spent it, etc. But there's a lot of different scenarios here. But if you haven't been cashed out and your insurer has not maxed out your benefits and there's money there in the policy that hasn't been made available to you, then you do want to get that, you want to get to that knowledge of what it would cost to have put back that house, even though I don't know if I've ever, I think maybe like 5 times in 31 years, met somebody who rebuilt the exact same house they had. They had the plans and they did it. Usually people want to be downsize or build bigger or build more modern, and they want to, fix some flaw or whatever. Okay, so this is our perspective. We believe that all dwelling coverages should be made available toward the purchase, including code upgrade, extended coverage, and other structures, even though you're not incurring those costs in connection with the purchase. Why? Because you would have incurred those had you rebuilt. And we look at these things from a position of logic, that if they would have had to pay you that for the rebuild, then they owe you that for the purchase. So that's how we see it at United Policyholders. And it took us 3 times in California, going back to the legislature, because to have the law reflect what we know is the logic, right? So insurers have really resisted. They liked the way it was. They liked the way it was, which was, unless you rebuilt, they didn't have to pay you everything that they owed you. And so they liked it that way, because people have always sort of, there's a common law right to buy a replacement home, but that never has meant, until the statutes clarified it in the last 5 years, that's never meant that the insurer had to pay everything, even if their contract said we only pay it once it's incurred. That's the tricky word there, incurred. Okay. So this has been a tug of war. It's now settled in California, and it's settled in Colorado. You don't have to incur code upgrade costs to get them, to have your insurer pay you for the value of those. But because the law that just got passed, and I think you Marshall folks know this, it wasn't retroactive. It's never retroactive when we get these advances. They never are retroactive. Insurers are still holding the line on those 2 points, on the code upgrades and the replacement, extended replacement. Not for everybody. So that's why we're here, to sort of give you negotiating points. But I want to say that I did slightly change the title of tonight's program from buying a replacement home without leaving money on the table to buying a replacement home after a wildfire, because I have come to the conclusion, after talking to a lot of people, that it's not the end of the world to leave a little bit of money on the table if it's going to improve the quality of your family's life, and if it's going to help you put this thing behind you. And I think, if I could just turn to Tim for a minute and ask you to sort of comment on that point, that at some point you just decided we're not going to fight about the code upgrades, right?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't have said that better myself. Maybe that really was what it came down to. We did get the extended dwelling, most of the additional structures, some of our trees and shrubs money, and they really were kind of like trying to max us out to the point, the limits of our policy. We didn't provide them with a builder estimate, but we had provided them with a lot of evidence of all the work we had done on the house over the last 14 years or so. So, so they had that information. And we knew we were leaving ordinance and law on the table. That was probably the biggest bucket of money. We were probably leaving some money for trees, shrubs, some of the money for additional structure. But we just kind of made the decision as a family that we just didn't want to rebuild. It wasn't how we wanted to spend, my oldest senior year. We just didn't want to be doing that. And that was just an incredibly personal decision and a difficult decision. But I think it was the right one for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge load off your shoulders, right? It's just sort of, yeah. Well, we did get a question. Did you get extended dwelling coverage? Did they pay you that?
Yes, we got the extended dwelling coverage. Yep.
Okay, all right. Okay, we have a question for both of you from Karen Farrelly. Tim, did you sell your original land then? Or was there another process required in the replacement home case, such as having to sign the land over to the mortgage holder, if any?
No, we used our settlement to, we didn't have a super big mortgage. We used the settlement to pay off the original mortgage. So at this point in time, we own the land free and clear, and we're just trying to decide what our next step is on that. So, yep.
Well, we got another question for you from Stella. Is your lot on the market or already sold?
It is not currently on the market. We just got back from vacation about a week ago, so we just haven't had a chance to really think about that piece of it yet.
Okay. And then actually, Sharon, Karen had the same question for you. Did you sell your original land? And if so, when?
Yeah, I didn't have a mortgage. And after I bought the replacement home, there was still a part of me that thought, maybe I will rebuild. Just maybe, because, as the flurry of, all the builders, as it became more possible to find people to build the home. So I didn't sell for about 2 years after I had moved into my new house. It's been 5 years, well, almost 5 years since the fire. But then I decided that it was time to sell because realistically, I was not going to move back. And I was still doing some maintenance. I mean, there was brush maintenance and there was a pool to make sure the mosquito abatement and, taxes on it. And I'm going, I don't need to hang on to this anymore. But it was like I was so overloaded with too many decisions. Once I had made the decision to buy and the land was still there and the purchase of the house was a little bit under. It was under the money that I got from the insurance, and I still had the land. So that was intentional to have a little bit of a bucket to do some improvements in the house that I did purchase.
Yep. All right. Good. All right. We'll keep going through the slides here. And so back to the process. Generally speaking, once you reach an agreement with your insurer on what they would have owed you if you had rebuilt, then they should make that money available to you, and you go and you find a house that's close to that same amount, and in theory they should commit to paying you the full amount that they would have owed you for the rebuild, and you should be able to complete the purchase. As we know that sometimes that works smoothly and sometimes it doesn't. We're getting some questions from somebody who's not with State Farm, with USAA, that they're having trouble connecting with the adjuster. And in that case, I would say, filing a request for assistance with the Department of Insurance is your next step there, to get better service, better customer service from the insurance company. So yeah, this is just the sort of your basic law. This is the law in California. What they owe you is what it would cost to replace the thing lost, and that includes if the county wouldn't give you a certificate of occupancy if you didn't comply with the building codes, that means you have to comply with the building codes. So that is part of the cost of replacing the thing lost, right? So yes, policies have always excluded what's called betterment, but in California, if you don't have code upgrade coverage at all, then there's that, then you can't go chasing that. But if you have it, then it should be made available to you, even if you're not obviously you're not incurring it, but it should be made available to you for purchase of the house. Which means sometimes you have to get those code upgrades broken out for what it would have, what code upgrades you would have had to make and what they would have cost if you had rebuilt. So this is us continuing to harp on this point that getting agreement on that hypothetical rebuild cost is what you need to do in most cases if they haven't maxed you out and cashed you out. And you know, we have curriculum, you can watch some of our prior webinars just about that, you know, getting an apples to apples rebuild estimate for the house, even though you're not intending to do that project, and what are some of the ways you can do that. You know, these days your adjuster is going to use a computer program, Xactimate. Computers don't build homes, builders build homes. How do builders price a project? With subcontractor bids. They don't use Xactimate. So very often you're in this difficult situation where your adjuster has given you a number and said, this is our valuation, and it seems low to you based on what builders are telling you, but getting a builder to give you a detailed enough estimate that you can take to the insurer and say, no, this is the right number, not your computer number, that can be challenging. But we have given lots of suggestions for how you can do that. And even if you have to pay for it, which is painful, but again, you know, when your goal is to get your life back on track and replace your dwelling, sometimes spending some money to get there is worth it. So in this case, if you are really at loggerheads with your insurance company over the replacement value of that old home, it's worth paying somebody to really price out that what the rebuild would cost, even and sometimes you have to pay for that, because if a builder is not going to give you a detailed estimate on a project that he or she knows you're not going to hire them to do. So this is the California law that makes it very clear that you have the right to replace by buying, and they cannot withhold money. This is a tool, the gal that was going to be with us tonight, Lee, who's a lovely person, and her family have also been great volunteers. They had a really hard time deciding whether they were going to buy or rebuild. And then when they decided they were going to buy, they used a tool, a forced choice matrix, for making the decision. And it was very helpful to them. And we offer a link to that tool in our library. And this is kind of how it worked. This was basically for them figuring out what their priorities were.
Interesting.
And this is how they laid it out. And you can see in her notes here, it says, a few things I will say in retrospect. This makes us sound a lot more rational and calm than we felt. In truth, we were traumatized, and this just helped us think more clearly. And that's why we share it, because we are well aware of that reality, that when you're in the middle of the situation, you're not at your best in terms of thinking and deciding. So this is a tool that you can use when you're trying to figure out what's important to you. And you can see how it worked for them. Okay, let's take another deep breath. Okay, before we get into the state laws, we have a question for you, Tim. Did your policy specifically say that the 20% extended coverage applied to the purchase of your replacement home?
I don't recall it saying anywhere specifically that language being in the policy anywhere. They had just kind of, when they gave us the initial settlement, they had just included that 20% in that settlement.
Yeah. Okay. So we talked about other structures, but by that we mean garages, outbuildings. It's usually a separate bucket of coverage. And in California, and also now in Colorado, but again, technically not retroactively applicable to the Marshall Fire, but arguably in logic, your insurer should give you the other structures coverage towards the purchase price in both states. Land value deduction. So that's, we just talked about that. We talked a little bit about that with Tim. So one of the first things that once we got the right in California law for people to be able to just use their insurance money to buy, one of the first things insurers did was they came up with this argument and said, well, but we don't have to pay for the value of the land under the house that you're buying because that would be unjust enrichment. Then you end up with two lots. And we, thought about it and it just didn't quite seem right. And of course, land value is very subjective. So we kind of kicked this around with a lot of experts and we talked about it with the Department of Insurance. And we felt that they were wrong. And we even got the Department of Insurance in California to write a letter, like the general counsel wrote a letter saying, we don't want to see insurers doing that. But of course, they kept doing it anyway. They were like, well, that's just a letter. It's not the law. So then the legislature went back and clarified, no, we really meant that you don't get to take a land value deduction. But that has not been that wasn't the law in Colorado. So as you heard from Tim, his insurer did take a deduction for the land value. I'm going to show you what our logical arguments are. Now the laws changed in Colorado and they do have to, right? It says here, oh man, I'm not seeing that language. I know it's in there. Anyway, but before we leave that topic, gosh, I could swear that language is in there. I think we must just not have cut that language out. Anyway, I want to talk about what the logic is. So hang on, we're going to come back to this, but since we're talking, we're going to come back to all of this. But since we're talking about the land value, I want to stick with this. Okay. So some insurers want to deduct an amount for the land, right? We talked about this. We say it's unfair, it's unsettled. Our argument is, this is our logic, that the old house with the land, let's say the old house with the land was worth, it would have cost $500,000 to rebuild. The land was irrelevant. It's already there. Our argument has always been, then the person gets $500,000 to buy a new house. It doesn't matter that they're getting a new lot, because if the new house costs $500,000 with the land and the old house costs $500,000 without the land, then arguably they're getting a less valuable house when they bought it because it's $500,000 with the land. So it comes out the same, is basically has been our argument. And so also subjective, right? What the land value is. So Tim, how did, but insurers are fighting hard on this. They're still fighting hard on this, which is why Tim let it go. But Tim, you said that there were, you said that the insurer, what did they use to value the land? I think you said it was the appraisal that the assessors, the county assessor report.
Yeah, so in our case, it's Boulder County. The assessed value of the land for the new home that we were buying is what they asked for.
To deduct, okay, or
Yeah.
to withhold, not to withhold, right? And so I kind of think that's probably worked in your favor, because my guess is if you were to have gone with like the real estate appraisal of the land, it might have been higher than what the county. So yeah, so I think that's a
Yeah.
little tip if your insurer is fighting you on the land to withhold the land value. You want to go for the lowest land value documentation that you can find. It's probably going to be from the county.
Yeah.
But just to illustrate our logic here, and I don't know if this is going to come out, but this illustrates what I was trying to say, right? When you purchase the home, your original home, you bought the structure and the land, right? Home insurance only covers the structure, not the land. That's another argument. So in this, let's say the house that was lost was worth 400, a little different from my example, and the value of the land is unknown. Okay. If your home was properly insured, your replacement cost value should be 400,000 for a total loss. Doesn't matter what the land under it was valued at. If you decide to buy elsewhere, let's say you buy a house for 400,000, okay, that's going to include the land and the house. That means you'd be left with a house that's worth less than the value if they were to deduct the land. So that's our logic. And the result is you're not unjustly enriched. You're basically in the same position. And of course, you just, in terms of the question, the value of the old lot, super hard to pin that down, right? Changing all the time. So we're going to go back. So I think we missed a few slides there that I want to make sure we cover. Sorry, just close your eyes so you don't get dizzy. Okay. So we've hit on, so what are the challenges you may be encountering? We talked about this, like that the exact or whatever the adjuster came up with for the placement cost value of the destroyed home is lower than what you think they owe you. And maybe it's missing some things. Maybe it's missing soft costs and supervision. Maybe it's, and then these other things. They're saying, we're not going to give you your code upgrades. We're going to take out land. We argue that you're entitled to like, kind, and quality. So if it was going to cost X, 400,000 or 500,000 to rebuild, that's what you get. That's like, kind, and quality. This is just a reference for those of you in California to help you if you are in a battle with your adjuster over what the fair replacement cost value is. These are your rights to break that log jam. The ordinance and law this is just a negotiating point. Give it a try. And the best way, if you want to buy and you don't want to leave money on the table and you had code upgrade coverage in your policy, you want to quantify what that cost element would have been for the rebuild project, as I said already. So if you can quantify that, and then you can use, we have a sample of a code upgrade estimate broken out on our website here. And then we have a sample letter asking that they give you that money. This is the law in California. It's clear as day now and forever that you that's available to you towards the purchase. In Colorado, the commissioner has done everything he can to help you on this point. He put out this bulletin saying to the insurers, don't make people have to spend to get the full amount that don't make them, advance funds and then reimburse them. Or if they're not, don't hold them to that requirement that they incur a cost, code upgrade cost, for example, or extended replacement for you to pay. So he's trying, but this is a bulletin and it's not a mandate. So we talked about this. We already covered these slides. So close your eyes again so you don't get dizzy. We're moving through this.
Amy, can I just jump in on
Yes,
the land value issue?
Jump right in.
I think I mentioned earlier that, there were a number of things on my checklist when we tried to do this deal, when we did this deal. And I really thought that one of them or another was just going to scuttle the whole thing. And the land value is one of them. The insurance adjuster said to me, I need the county assessor of the land value for the new home. And I won't go into his explanation because I think, as we've all found, our adjusters are nowhere near experts on any of this, and you can't take anything they say, as like the truth. But I sent them that detail, and nothing happened. I mean, there was no implication of me doing that. They didn't come to us and say, no, you can't do it. no, we're going to claw back some of the money. None of that happened. And we did have the bonus of we were working with a public adjuster on the remaining 50% of our personal property. So I was able to kind of run all this by him and just, get it like, am I leaving anything on the table? Am I missing anything in the policy? And that was, to me, that was a really useful checkpoint to have him be able to look at it and say, I think you're about as good as you're going to get in this scenario. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. Sharon, what kind of people did you turn to get help when you were going through this process?
In the beginning, I kind of worked on my own counsel. I mean, I had friends that were helpful in terms of, gee, you've been through so much, but in terms of knowing what to do, that wasn't so helpful. I had a contractor friend who helped me with that, the exactament, looking over all of that to see if what the insurance was providing was fair to, based on the way he would figure it out. And that was good. Once I finally decided that I was pretty sure I was going to buy, then I had realtor friends that were helping me to find a place in the area that I was, so I spent 6 months looking. The pressure for me was that ALE would run out in 24 months.
Right.
And I was already into my 18-month time. So and by then I was eager to find a house. Interestingly enough, which I mentioned to you earlier, I had to play this game with the adjuster. In other words, I had to send in a monthly report proving that I was on track for rebuild so that he would issue me an ALE check, which was coming monthly. But I had already decided I was not going to rebuild. In the middle of all that, my agent had retired and I was assigned a new agent. And this office of this agency was really helpful. So I got another agent in that department to help me negotiate with the adjuster from another state, who was kind of, I was spending a lot of time doing something that was not what I knew I was going to be doing, but I wasn't able to say that to him because then I wouldn't be getting my ALE checks. So the local agent kind of ran interference for me. And it was the strangest thing. But then I felt like there was, of all the places, and after 17 adjusters, it turned out to be the insurance company that was actually helping me through the last hurdles, which was a surprise, but they did. And I got my checks and it all worked out. But
wow, 17 adjusters.
Yeah. I mean, they would do a little something and then disappear, and then a little something and disappear. I think many people have had this experience.
Yes.
And because I had been out of the country when the fires broke out, I had a car loss, and that was a whole other thing. But I learned to kind of work with the change of adjuster. First, it was frustrating because the rules change and the style changed, but then it was like I knew that I would only get so far, and I had, I was able to get the information from the adjuster that was going to be leaving me as to how to anticipate what the next adjuster was what hoops I was going to have to work with. It became like a strange puzzle. As I look at it now, it was totally frustrating at the time.
Yes. So what I'm going to do is I want to just make sure I get through all the slides, and then I'm going to stop sharing so we can see the people who are talking, and we can answer the rest of the questions that have come in. You saw we have the links to our library and our sample letters for California. Same thing for Marshall Fire. Sample letters are particularly useful. Excuse me. And the samples of documents. These are the upcoming events that we have. Geez, no, these are not the upcoming event. This isn't okay. This is, we've got a reminder about the Survivor Speak series, and a reminder that those are tips that are written in the words of people like Sharon and Tim, that are sort of the lessons people learned on their own journeys. The Survivor Forum, I mentioned that earlier. If you don't get your questions answered tonight, you can try using our Ask an Expert forum, which is free. And you can take a look at some of the answers that have been posted to other people's questions and see if those are helpful. The CDI, California Department's 800 number, the Colorado DOI's 800 number. Those are great places to get information, to get your adjuster's attention, and also information about whatever bulletins may be there. But they're really, the departments of insurance are, when you file a complaint with them, they will go to the insurance company, and it's gonna elevate your situation, because the insurance company has to pay attention when the state regulator calls them. So it's a good way, if your adjuster's not being responsive, the gal who wrote in questions about USAA, that's a hands down easy answer to go to the Colorado department. We want to thank the funders that are making it possible for us to bring these programs to you. The Santa Cruz Community Foundation, the Rural County Representatives of California, the Golden State Finance Authority, the Community Foundation of Boulder, which was incredibly helpful in helping us get right in after the Marshall Fire, as well as the United Way of Larimer County. So I'm going to stop sharing so that you can see when Sharon or Tim are speaking. We have a few more questions I wanted to get through here before we let you get back to your evenings. Julie asks, if you haven't settled your insurance claim, is there a chance they would settle based at least in part on the cost of the house you buy? So there's a kind of risk that if you buy a house for less than your insurance policy benefits, you choose to downsize, or you move to a cheaper neighborhood, you end up leaving money on the table. Yes. I'm going to say, in my opinion, yes. And that may be why I see Tim nodding, and Sharon waited a lot of people say this, you waited a long time before you told the adjuster that you were not planning to rebuild, correct?
Yes,
And why is that?
because he told me that I would not get my I would not get my ALE unless I could prove to him that I was moving forward with a rebuild.
Right.
And his mindset was on the rebuild. There wasn't any room in that discussion to say, well, I'm moving in a different direction.
Right.
It just wasn't available.
And that
was intervention by the local agent.
Yeah. And I mean, and that is, that's because a lot of these adjusters come from out of state. They're not, and California and Colorado and Oregon now are the only 3 states in the country where there is a law on the books that says you can buy a replacement home without leaving money on the insurance funds on the table. So these adjusters, they just don't know that it's even an option. And so, that's the hurdle that all of you face right now. And that's why I started out, tonight's program with that polite assertiveness slide, because you got to be polite and not make them feel like, a dummy because they don't know the rules. You got to be, sort of polite about it, but you also have to let them know, as always, that you're the squeaky wheel, and you're not gonna stop squeaking, and logic and numbers are on your side. So Tim, did you have concerns about telling your adjuster that you were not going to rebuild? Did you have that similar concern?
Yeah, I think once we made the decision, and early May that we might go down that road, it was one of my concerns about, well, what is this going to mean? I mean, can they actually tell me to return some of the money that's in escrow or that they've given me? I mean, I didn't know how the whole thing, I mean, I was thinking when I saw the title of this, I was like, ooh, that would have been awesome, to have this happen for me in like late April, because this is such useful information. So I didn't know, I wasn't aware of how it would all go. So I was very nervous about telling him.
But honestly, because many insurers are still saying this new law didn't kick in yet, lots of people are in this situation where their insurer is saying, yeah, sure, you can buy, but we're not giving you your code upgrade coverage and we're not giving you your extended replacement. Part of what we're here to try to do tonight is to, give people those arguments, and give people the ammunition, but it's not a guarantee.
Right.
In Colorado, it just isn't. It's just and so that's why I think you're a really good example, because there you are now. You're home again in your own way. And it's not, everybody's path is their path, but it's like, in a couple of, this is going to be behind, the fact that you might have left some money on the table is going to be behind you before you know it. So, just everybody's journey and people's choice to fight, and we want, if people want to fight, we're giving you the ammunition. We just cannot promise. David, where did that question go? It's gone. Okay. It's in the, you answered it. That's fine. Right. So David Takahashi asked, in Colorado, can homeowners with total losses be able to get their settlement without going through reimbursement, meaning access the full coverage to buy an existing home? The answer to that question is maybe. Unfortunately, it depends on your insurance company. It depends on your adjuster. We say, take your best shot. We're giving you, like I said, we're giving you all the ammunition we can give you. Here's what the bulletin says, from Commissioner Conway, they should not make you spend to get, right? But it's a bulletin. And he cannot force them. And the law is technically not retroactive, but if you've got the energy, fight it out with logic. So okay. Then we have a few more. We have got Julie asking, it's kind of more of a comment. Julie says, a huge challenge is that insurers want you to make a decision that's hard to make without knowing your budget, which is very true. I find myself in the chicken and egg conversation of needing a settlement amount to choose whether to buy or rebuild, and the insurer wanting to know what we're doing. Our experience with State Farm has so far been great, but this is still complicated. So that kind of goes to what we've been talking about, right? I mean, it's, this is a decision that takes time, and it is difficult, but once you do that math so that you feel comfortable in your own mind that you have a fair number for the valuation of the original home, what it would have cost, then that's the most important piece of ammunition, I think, when you're fighting with your insurer over what they owe you. Well, you would have paid this. I'm going to try to, one of the arguments you can make with an adjuster is like, if I buy, we're done. You don't have, you can close this file, and then you don't, and you don't have to, the insurance company doesn't have to wait for me to send invoices and, do quality control on the progress of the construction. And, I'll be done and I won't be claiming ALE anymore. That's another one, right? So you can give them these arguments, to support what you want. And I think a lot of what our message is like, you got to figure out what you want. And I know it's hard if you don't know what they're going to pay you, But if what you want is the full amount you're entitled to, at least make sure that you have done a calculation that seems right to you of what that construction project would have cost.
Yeah, Amy, that, the polite assertiveness, we use that a lot. And the ALE argument, we use that to get them to pay. We had a break lease fee on our apartment. We had moving expenses. And my argument to them was, I'm saving you 18 months of ALE on a rental. So, would you cover those two things? And they came back and said, yeah, they would do that. And, that was nice of them. I didn't expect them to necessarily do that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yep. So this is also sort of a comment from Julie. Land without a house may also be more valuable than land with a house, because the possibility of a house may be more valuable than the reality of a house. Buying vacant land gives me the opportunity to buy the house I want rather than compromise on the house it is. It's more of a comment. It sounds like, Sharon, you went through a lot of that kind of thinking before you landed on your decision.
Yeah, and it was interesting because of waiting so long to make the decision to sell the land values changed so dramatically, because in the beginning, there was just all this distressed land that was, the value was so low.
Yep.
And then a little bit later, then we have COVID and people are moving out of the urban areas and wanting to be in a place where there's space and acreage. So then it became very, very popular, but then we started getting fires again. So
Yeah.
the available, the price was very, very fluid.
Mhm.
Because that was part of my decision, is what's the land worth? And it was an unknown.
Yep. I mean, to me, that's another logical argument to make, is like, the value of the land is so speculative and it changes and you don't know, and it's just should not be part of the discussion. Georgianne asks, does any of this advice about not leaving money on the table apply to personal content coverage? Well, I would say yes, in a way, but I would say probably ask a lot of survivors and they're going to say no. I think, you've got time to do your inventory. Insurers will, you generally speaking, you really have a good amount of time to complete that inventory. And for a lot of people, they just cannot even start the process for quite a while. Everybody's different. Some people find it so sad that they just cannot, sit down. But as time passes, generally, you can find the energy, or, UP offers these spreadsheets, and we have, you can watch some of our workshops on doing your inventory. But at the end of the day, Sharon, what do you think about this? I mean, is it leaving money on the table for contents? What do you think?
I had a good friend who was advising me to just let it go, because my insurance, they paid out a certain amount without doing the inventory, but then to get the balance, you had to complete the inventory. But I became sort of OCD about it. I was really compulsively wanting to get everything entitled to me. That was my fight at that time.
Mhm.
And I realized that because of the underinsured on the structure, that personal property, because I had decided to downsize, that what I would get in from the personal property would then go toward the house. So I fought it and fought it and fought it. And but it's so personal.
It is
I know
personal.
people that just let it go, saying, what, I can't deal with this anymore, because there's this element of mental health that's really critical. If you begin to get like dysfunctional because of these stresses, then what's the point? But
Yeah.
I just needed to follow through, and I did. And I didn't know whether it would work, and it did, and I got the full amount.
Yeah. How about Tim? Any thoughts on this one on personal property and whether, whether it's worth putting the slog in to get to the full dollar amount?
Yeah, I mean, now that we have a house to furnish, I mean, that's our main focus right now, is getting the additional 50% from State Farm. So we're just working on it, but it's painful and sad. You're right, Sharon.
Yeah. Yeah. And Debbie asked, for those of you that had to replace everything you own in a typical household, how much approximately did you spend? I mean, that's a really tough question to answer. I after 31 years of trying to help people in these situations, I don't have an answer to that. Val, if you have an answer, or Sharon, if you have an answer.
No answer.
No.
Yeah,
Well, I do have an answer. I became a minimalist because the things that were so important, after they were gone, then, and they couldn't come back, it's like, I'm not going to go buy a bunch of art so that I'm going to feel comfort when that was the whole history of my life. So I'm just, I have clothes, I have a bed, I have a couch, I have a kitchen table. It's really minimal. And then little by little, I may add things. Something about things being important, which I kind of took for granted. After the fire, things became things in a way.
I appreciate that. Val, did you have any thoughts about that? I know you do a lot of contents focused work.
yeah. I mean, I have two things to add for people who are significantly underinsured. Maximizing that content, those contents dollars are, as Tim said, what's going to get you in that home to furnish. So financially, we had a survivor with the Thomas fire in 2017. She just retired before she lost her home in the fire, and she said every page she turned in was the biggest paycheck anybody was paying her. And so it made sense for her to do it. They plowed most of the money in there, and their dining room table the first 2 years was their patio set, because they couldn't afford the dining room set they wanted, but they knew they would put it outside when they replaced it. So there's that piece. But the other part is just, how painful is it? And it's a personal decision to figure out what you can do.
Yep. Absolutely. But Val's point about the contents money, being part of what underinsured people often use to try to finance their home replacement is an important point to highlight as well. So we have one more question and then we're going to wrap up. And it's a good one because it kind of touches on what this realtor was telling me yesterday in the Marshall area. So ALE, the question is getting, from Matt Sanchez, is getting full ALE allowance a viable option for a new home purchase as opposed to possibly exceeding our ALE while waiting to rebuild? Could this be viewed like O&L, ordinance and law, since full ALE would likely be fully used if rebuilding anyway? So, I mean, if you look at ALE, and yes, when you buy, unless you've negotiated with your insurer and said, okay, as part, I'm underinsured, I need every dollar to replace this dwelling. So I need my contents, I need my extended, I need my code upgrades, and I need my contents. That's part of the negotiation. If you can do it towards the purchase price, right? ALE is right in there as well. Like, so if I buy, like, in Tim's case, he's replaced his home, within the first year. So in theory, like, Tim, did you have 12 or 24 of ALE?
We had 24 months of ALE.
Good. So that, that I'm sure was part of your negotiations and discussions. And for a lot of people, again, this is a pot, right? We're trying to put everything in it if we can. So we have the biggest possible pot towards the purchase. So ALE, you can, that's one of these negotiating points. For a lot of people, it's like, well, you'd be paying. And so, okay, so this is what the realtor was telling me yesterday. He said, well, I had this client who, the insurer was offering them $3,000 a month as an ALE allotment, but they had 3 kids, and I worked up some comps for them that 3,000 was nowhere near enough in monthly rent for a place that was comparable to what they had to accommodate a family of 5. And so he was able to get the insurer to agree that instead of the 3,000 a month in ALE that they owed, that it would be 8,000 a month that they would have owed. And that gave him a negotiating point he was able to, I guess, max out their ALE at that higher level and put that into a pot to buy a temporary replacement home. So it was like a smaller home. It wasn't going to be their final home. It's an investment property. They're going to live in it while they rebuild. And, the clients were like, they didn't like the investment place. They were like, I don't want to live in this. It's not that nice or whatever. And the realtor convinced them that this is a long range plan, right? You just have to live in it for a couple years, use your ALE money, buy this thing, and then you can use your dwelling and benefits to rebuild. And then you'll be able to, rent that place out. And, I'm sure they couldn't have done this, but for a pretty smooth realtor who was able to help them, document that higher rental. But it's something, right? These are all negotiating points, and even though, like I said in the beginning, it pains me to say to people, you get what you negotiate, it's true. And, if the person that you're negotiating with is being a jerk, then you got to try to get to somebody else. And, and it can happen, but it's like Sharon said, sometimes it takes, I don't want to say it takes 17 adjusters, but eventually she did get to a person affiliated with her insurance company that actually helped her get it, get to the end. So, for those of you who are in Colorado, you're still not that far down the road. So there's still a lot of options for you, to exercise. But again, it's gonna come down to documenting the value of what you lost and documenting it if you're not getting, if the insurer's not maxing you out, and then picking up all these negotiating points. And if you can do it yourself, do it. If you need to get help, there's no shame in that. You heard Tim say he got some help from a public adjuster. We give you all the free help that we can. And sometimes you do have to pay for help. And there's no shame in that. So I hope we've given you all some good information tonight. I'm so grateful to you, Sharon, and to you, Tim, to you, Val, to you, Carolyn, and to everybody who tuned in tonight and logged on. If these questions had easy answers, we wouldn't all be here. So, just keep on getting as much sleep as you can and doing exactly what you're doing. Get information from reliable sources, take your time, and you'll be fine. You'll make decisions. And if you need to, change your mind down the road, then you cross that bridge when you come to it. So I wish you all a peaceful evening. Any closing thoughts, Sharon or Tim, before we go?
Thank you. No. I'm grateful to be out of that particular tunnel.
Right. But again, you're living proof that one can get through that tunnel, even as a single person, living in the country,
Yeah.
and kind of doing it on your own. So, and Tim, you with your family and your dogs and your kids and all that. Anyway, so have a pleasant evening, everyone. This recording will be available on our website. And if you missed anything, you can watch it again. And all of our recorded webinars are available through links on our website, on our YouTube channel. So good night, everyone. That
Thank you.
concludes the program.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.